Hi and welcome to Northwest Guitars. In this video we're going to be constructing one of the more popular Telecaster switching mods, which is the four-way switching mod, and this method gives you both out of phase and parallel switching methods for a greater range of tones, and it's also pretty easy to put together as well. It does require a little modding of the neck pickup, very simple to do, and we'll show you how to do that a little bit later. Hopefully the tutorial is pretty easy to follow. So if you wanted to build this particular mod yourself, we sell all the parts in kit form, which you can order from our website. Or if you're not too confident with the soldering iron, we also sell a fully loaded version, which just needs dropping into your guitar. It takes around about 2 or 3 minutes to actually fit. Okay, so here are the components that we're going to be using for this particular mod. Obviously the control plate. We've then got two CTS pots. In this case we're using 250k. Both audio taper. We're also using a Sprague orange drop capacitor. This one is 0.022 microfarads. Obviously we're using a four-way switch for this particular control plate. Obviously an output jack, single output jack, mono output jack, and some vintage cloth pushback wire. Now we sell all this as a kit on our website, so you can buy it there. And as I said before, we sell the fully loaded version if you're not too confident with the soldering. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is attach the pots. Now you tend to find with CTS pots that the lugs tend to stick out a little bit, so I like to push them all so they're all nice and straight, just to give me a bit more room to play with. Okay, and like to make sure that they're facing each other as well, which just makes it a little bit easier to wire. To tighten the nuts up, I've got a ratchet spanner, a 13mm ratchet spanner, which is quite easy to use. If you don't have one of these, then the other thing you can do is use an adjustable spanner, but obviously you don't want the spanner to be scratching your control plate, so what you can do is a couple of pieces of electrical tape. Just put them over one side with the spanner, like that. And then I just trim the edges off with a Stanley knife. And basically just score around the edges where the spanner opens up, like that. And that way you've got a nice smooth surface which isn't going to scratch the control plate. And that works just as well. And then for the switch, when I put the switch in, I like to make sure that the shiny side of the switch is facing to the left. No particular reason, that's just the way I've always done them. Okay, there we go. That's the basics done. Okay, so now the control plate is ready to be wired. The first thing we're going to do is move some of these things out of the way. I like to use this piece of equipment just to keep the control plate steady while I'm wiring it up, but obviously I don't want to get the end scratched, so I've just got some masking tape here. I'm just going to mask off the very ends of the control plate. Just like that. It's not very neat, but it'll do the job. And that way I can keep hold of that without that moving around too much. And that'll keep everything in place. Okay, so now the control plate's all set up, ready to be wired. we've got the switch, we've got the volume pot, we've got the tone pot. The first thing we want to do is attach the capacitor, and what I like to do is I like to share the capacitor between the top lug on the volume pot and the middle lug on the tone. There are lots of different ways of wiring this. We'll put the diagram up so you can see the way that we do it, but you're not going to need most of the wire on one side of this capacitor, so we're going to clip that off. So that's what we're left with. I'm going to feed that through this lug on the top of the volume pot and the middle one of the tone. Just let that hang down as such. I'm going to bend this piece of wire just so that it touches the edge of the pot, and then I'm going to solder those 3 points in place. Some people will tell you that you need to use a heatsink when you're soldering capacitors. I've never found that, to be honest. We've wired hundreds of these and we've never had any problem, so I don't think that it's completely necessary. So the first point there, that's on, and the second point, and the third. And this is just a very basic soldering iron that I picked up from Maplin's. It's a 30-watt soldering iron, nothing special. It cost me 20 quid I think from Maplin's. I'm just going to trim the edge of that wire off there, so that's all nice and neat, as you can see. So the pot is connected, the capacitor is connected in 3 places, as you can see, and that's done. Okay, the next thing we want to do is a bit of black cloth wire. And again, the great thing about this is that there's no need to strip the wires, you just need to pull them back slightly. You might want to tin them a little bit first. Just like that. And this particular wire is going to go from the bottom 2 lugs, from the volume and the tone pot, and then we're going to join that up to one of the contacts on the switch. So you can see that. First thing I'm going to do is put a blob of solder on there. And goes the wire eventually. And that piece of wire goes across to the other contact, the opposite contact. I'm just going to solder that in place. And then another piece of wire that's going to go in from the rear of that particular contact. So both of those wires are joined together now. I'm going to take that wire it to the front of the switch, not the shiny side, the opposite side, and we're going to wire it to the 3rd contact from the pot. So 1, 2, 3. I'll wire it there. I like to make a little loop. This will give me a bit of wire to play with, just like that. And that goes in there. That's the 3rd one. And then we need a jumper that goes from the 3rd to the 4th on that particular side. So I'm also going to push another wire through there at the same time. Easy said than done when you're working back to front. That'll do. And then just a little blob of solder on there. And you've got to be this is the most tricky part, I guess. You just need to be careful not to get too much solder on these contacts, otherwise it can drip down inside the switch and stop the switch from working. But that looks pretty good. And then I'm going to make a small loop, rather than trying to stretch that wire to the next lug, which is really difficult to do. I'm going to make a little loop, use a bit more wire, but it makes it a lot easier when you come to solder them. Okay, so that's in there. And again, just a small amount of solder just to keep that in place. There we go, that's one side all wired up. And then for the other side, the piece of wire. I'm going to tin this one because this one is going to attach to the pot. I'm going to attach this piece of wire to the back of the volume pot. Like so. And then this piece of wire is also going to go to the third contact on the back of the switch. It's a good idea to just bend these wires slightly up so that they fit in a little bit easier. He says. This is starting to fray a little bit, so I'm just going to tin this ever so slightly. I'm going to do the same with another piece of wire, because again we're going to jump from one lug to the next. Okay, so 1, 2, third lug. And then another piece of wire that's going to jump from the third to the fourth. Hopefully you can see that. There's 2 wires in there. Doesn't matter if they're a little bit long, we can always trim them off later. There we go, that's those in place. And again, a little bit of a loop. And that's that. So there we go, that's almost finished. The tricky part now, I guess, is I have to just add a little bit of wire to jump from the second lug on the shiny side to the first lug on the opposite side. This one's a bit more tricky. So I'm just going to add a blob of solder onto this second lug. Just like that. And I'm going to attach my wire. I just created a small loop there, just enough so I can pull back some of this wire, just enough to sort of feed it through. And again, that's fraying, so just going to turn it slightly. And push that through there. And you can just about see where that's come through. Opposite side there. Small amount of solder to keep that in place, and that's it. Okay, so now that we've finished building the control plate, the next thing we need to do is to mod the neck pickup. Especially if it has a cover, a metal cover, then it's necessary to do this. And basically what we're going to be doing is we're going to be severing this connection which goes to the cover. As you can see there, that piece of solder there is attached to the cover on the other side, so we just need to sever that connection. Then we're going to place another wire onto that cover, which I will show you how to do. So the first thing we're going to do is just heat that up and remove that connection there. Which is pretty simple to do, just needs heating up a little. There we go, that's done. And then we can cut that off. Like so. And then if you've got a different coloured piece of wire, it's advisable to use that, just so you know which wire is which. I haven't got one, unfortunately. I'm stuck with the black and the white. So I'm going to use another piece of black wire, but I'm going to put a piece of masking tape on it so I know which one is which. And this one is going to go to the ground, to the back of the volume pot in a few minutes. So we're just going to attach that. You can see the flap there, which is the back of which is the actual pickup cover, just poking through the top there. I'm just going to join those together, like so, and that's that. And obviously we need sort of similar length of wire to the other two pickup wires, so I'm just going to basically just make sure that they're all the same length. Just about there, cut that off. So now you can see that we have 3 wires attached, the 2 original wires and the wire that we just soldered, which is going to the back of the pickup cover. Okay, so we've now built the control plate. As you can see, I've put the knobs and the switches on it as well, the switch tip, so that's all ready to go. I've separated the neck pickup wires from the bridge pickup wires, and I'm going to fit the bridge first because that's the simplest one to do. So the first thing to do is to solder the ground wire to the volume pot. Doesn't really matter where you solder it, as long as it's on the back of there. Just get that on there. Okay, that's that. And then the hot wire, I'm just going to strip that back a little. The hot wire is going to go to the first terminal on the outside of the pot. So again, I'm just going to put a little dab of solder on that particular contact. There we go. And that's that. Okay. So that is the bridge connected. That just leaves the neck pickup. So we've got the hot wire, we've got the ground wire, and we've got the other ground wire as well. So first things first, the wire that we soldered to the back of the pickup cover, that is going to go to the volume pot as well. So I'm just going to solder that onto the top of there. The other ground wire I'm going to solder to the spare lug on the shiny side of the switch, as you can see there. I'm going to bring that around and push that through like that. And I'm going to have a little bit of solder to that, just keep that in place. There we go. Okay, so now we're left with just the hot wire, and the hot wire is going to go to the second lug from the furthest side, so 1, 2 on the plastic side. There's already a wire in there. I'm going to fit this one in as well if we can. It can be a bit of a struggle sometimes. There we go. There we go, that's it. So once all that is connected, you should have 2 spare contacts. The first one on the shiny side and the second one on the plastic side there. Everything else is connected, that's all done. Everything will fit in there pretty well. And that's pretty much it. So now we just need to wire the output socket. So I'm going to wire the ground wire first. And the ground wire is going to be attached to the tone pot, like so. And you can see that you don't need much. That's the output socket there, so you don't need much of a length there. But I'm going to make it easy for myself to wire it up, so I'm going to leave myself maybe 6 inches or so. The hot wire we're going to wire to the middle of the volume pot, just like that. Hope you can see what I'm doing there. The camera angle is probably not the best. But it's just going in there. Like that. Okay. Now I like to just make sure that both wires are a similar length. Like that. And then, just to keep them tidy, I like to twist them together a few times. Okay, so the last thing to do is to attach the wires to the jack socket. I'm going to be using this is my old one. This is an electro socket jack plate, which just basically the jack socket just screws into that. It's a more reliable, sturdy fit than the old cup style ones. And when you're wiring this, you'll notice there's 2 contact points. There's one lug on its own. It's not connected to, well, not connected to the centre anyway. That is your hot wire, and then you've got the other lug, which, as you can see, is a piece of metal that runs around the centre of the jack socket. If you can see that, that is your ground wire. That's your black wire. So basically, it's just a case of soldering the two wires onto those, fitting the jack socket, and it's all done. And you've got a nice 4-way mod Telecaster control plate for both parallel and series pickup positions.